Welcome back, Defenders. Jake here. Happening right now in Washington DC, there's a NATO summit. And NATO leadership affirms Ukraine's irreversible path towards membership. Now we can be realistic. Ukraine will not be joining NATO until this war is over. Russia has to be defeated first. But Ukraine absolutely has to join NATO. And going back in time 2.5 years ago, Ukraine didn't. The threat of Russia invading was always enough to keep Ukraine out of NATO forever. But Russia invaded anyways, and now we know Russia's true intentions. They want to steal Ukraine's land, and they want to steal Ukraine's people. So the only way to have peace on the European continent is for Ukraine to join NATO. We have 75 years of history. In 75 years, NATO has never attacked Russia, and Russia has never attacked a NATO country. So for peace in our time, we need Ukraine to join NATO. It's going to happen. So what do the Russians think about this? Here's a tweet from Dmitry Medvedev. The Washington Summit Declaration on July 10th mentions the irreversible path of Ukraine to NATO. For Russia, two possible ways of how this path ends are acceptable. Either Ukraine disappears, or NATO does. Still better, both. There's a third option, and that would be Russia disappearing. So President Zelensky's in Washington, D.C., and this is good for him to visit with members of Congress. This is the Democratic Minority Leader in the House, Hakeem Jeffries. Here's Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Here is the Senate Majority and Minority Leader, all meeting with President Zelensky. It's nice that Zelensky gets to make this visit, and it's not about passing a defense bill. But here in the United States, we are going to have this debate again. In December or January, Congress is going to have to vote again on another year's worth of military aid for Ukraine. A lot rides on the November election. I think you guys know who to vote for. So at the NATO summit, NATO allies announce $43 billion commitment to Ukraine for the next year. This is money coming from the NATO partners. In addition, the NATO alliance is expected to announce a new military command in Germany to train and equip NATO troops. So what was the big talking point? There was a couple. The first one is air defense systems. US and NATO allies to deliver dozens of air defense systems in the coming months, including 4 Patriots. So here's President Biden speaking at the NATO summit, and I'm going to play about 40 seconds of this.
My partners have signed a bilateral security agreements with Ukraine, and more countries will follow. Today, I'm announcing an historic donation of air defense equipment for Ukraine. The United States, Germany, the Netherlands, Romania, and Italy will provide Ukraine with the equipment for 5 additional strategic air defense systems. And in the coming months, the United States and our partners intend to provide Ukraine with dozens of additional tactical air defense systems. The United States will make sure that when we export critical air defense interceptors, Ukraine goes to the front of the line.
So President Biden has good days and he has bad days. Unfortunately, when 40 million Americans are watching a televised debate, that's a bad day. And when no Americans almost are watching a speech at the NATO summit, he has a good day. And in this speech, he didn't actually announce any new systems. These are not new systems. These are all known donations, either already arrived or on their way. So here's a breakdown of all the Patriot systems in total that have been donated. 2 from the United States, 4 from Germany, 1 from Spain, 1 from Romania, 1 being a combined effort from Sweden and the Netherlands, 1 from Italy, and then 1 from France and Italy combined. This gets you the 9 Patriot and SAM-PTs. These are the best air defense systems the West can give Ukraine. But on top of this, Ukraine is also getting NASAMS and Hawk and other various types of air defense systems. The other big story from the NATO summit is Secretary Blinken did say F-16s are traversing. They're on the way. And I know for the last 7 months, we've had Western leaders saying this, but it feels pretty official. So here's Secretary Blinken and what he said at the NATO summit.
And I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands. And those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against the Russian aggression.
This is partly why Russia wants a ceasefire. Russia's trying to call timeout in the battle just before these planes hit the skies over Ukraine. And here's the real strength, here's the real value of F-16s arriving. It's all the various missiles and ordnance and NATO inventories that can now be donated to Ukraine. Yes, we built adapters for the Scalp and the Storm Shadow to fit it to old Soviet aircraft, but all of this ordnance and these missiles work better if they can just be used with a NATO standard plane. So I'm looking at some juicy missiles here, such as the AMRAAM for air-to-air combat. We've got the AGM-84 Harpoon. Russia's going to lose some ships in the Sea of Azov pretty soon. And this is happening. I know we've been saying this for almost a year now, but it's happening at some point this month. Also worth mentioning at the NATO summit, the new Prime Minister for the UK, Keir Starmer, did meet with President Zelensky, and here's a clip from their first meeting.
How are you? Very good. Very glad to be meeting you.
Glad to meet you too.
It's very good to see you in person as Prime Minister. I've seen you as Leader of the Opposition, especially as Leader of the Opposition, but to come as Prime Minister is really important to me, and to be able to have this early opportunity to say again that, you know, as you know from the get-go, there is no reduction in our support for Ukraine.
I heard and so all the messages from your government and team and from people in United Kingdom, we are very thankful for your words and steps, which were important. Thank you that you are.
The big news coming out of the UK is the new Prime Minister reiterated that Ukraine has the right to strike inside of Russia with Storm Shadow cruise missiles. The newly appointed UK Prime Minister said the policy towards Ukraine remains unchanged, and it's up to Kyiv to how to decide to use their long-range weapons that the UK has given them. So this is a big missile, but unfortunately this is the wrong missile for the job. The Storm Shadow and Scalp are fantastic for taking down a building or going after a bunker. But for an airfield where planes are scattered, cluster munitions work better. The ideal ordnance to use would be a cluster variant of the ATACMS donated by the United States. We have to go after these planes. To use air defense systems to shoot down every missile and every drone that Russia fires, one, this is not cost effective, but it's also not a guarantee. But if we go after the airfields where these bombers are launching these missiles, we can stop the missiles and save some air defense missiles. So I think this is going to happen, but once again, it's a political process. Political pressure here in the United States has to build on Joe Biden and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan in order to reverse this position. And Russia might have screwed itself by blowing up this hospital because this is the event getting the world's attention to put pressure on President Biden to change this policy, to allow ATACMS, the cluster variants, to go after these airfields inside of Russia farther than 100 kilometers away. So Bellingcat confirms Russian missile strike on the Children's Hospital in Kyiv. Investigative journalists constructed a 3D model of the rocket and thoroughly analyzed photographs of the wreckage from the hospital attack. We have the fragments, we have the missile pulled from the rubble of the hospital. 100%, this is a Russian KH-101. Now, Russian propagandists are going to continue saying it was an air defense missile that hit this hospital. But you can just use your brain. You can just use common sense. The explosive power in an anti-aircraft or air defense missile is nowhere near the level of damage that this hospital sustained. The only explosive power capable of doing the damage we saw at this hospital was a Russian cruise missile deliberately targeting this hospital. And the Russians seemed to think it was them that did it. Russian pilot betrays colleagues who attacked the children's hospital in Kyiv. A Russian pilot has forwarded documents to Ukraine related to the activities of his military unit, as well as private photos of the command staff of the 22nd Heavy Bombing Aviation Division. Wow. The information provided includes documents from the personnel files of senior officers, as well as the personal data of Russian military personnel and their families. The most valuable are stamped documents from the 22nd Heavy Bombardment Aviation Division. So here's the photograph, a group photograph of the proud Russian pilots who bombed a children's hospital. Their faces have been identified, they've all been named by a pilot in their own unit. And all of these men are going to face war crimes charges when this war is over. All of these pilots, all of these people will be brought to justice after this war is over. So do the Russians think the policy is about to change and Ukraine's going to be allowed to use ATACMS deeper into Russia? Well, they think it's going to get even worse. On Kremlin State TV, they're already preparing their own people that Western missiles are going to be striking deeper and deeper into Russia, up to 1,000 kilometers. Here's Olga on Kremlin State TV. We are not talking about 100 or even 300 kilometers. Zelensky, to the approving applause of the staff of the Reagan Foundation in the United States, is talking about 1,000 kilometers. 1,000 kilometers deep into the territory of our country. That is, American missiles will hit cities of many millions, strategic nuclear force facilities, air defense. Zelensky has already been supported by Victoria Nuland, who said that the absolute majority of Americans consider Russia an enemy and would agree to increase the range of American missiles. Stoltenberg called for increased arms delivery to Ukraine and stated that it is time for the alliance to prepare for war with Russia in Europe, because Putin will not stop at Ukraine, of course. I find this fascinating how Russian state TV is preparing their own people for more missile strikes on Russian cities in response to Putin's special limited military operation, which has been going on for 2.5 years now. No, I don't think the United States is going to give Ukraine missiles that can go 1,000 kilometers. But yes, I think eventually these airfields launching missiles blowing up children's hospitals need to be addressed. So what's Viktor Orban doing? Viktor Orban has been on a world peace tour, first going to Ukraine to offer Putin's terms for a ceasefire, surrender. He then went to Russia to collect his paycheck and give his report to his boss. He then went to China to, bow before the emperor. And now Viktor Orban is in the United States, going to Florida to talk to America's next dictator. What do these three have in common? And Viktor Orban? Going to see Vladimir Putin in Moscow, then Xi Jinping in Beijing, and now Donald Trump in Mar-a-Lago. For my fellow Americans, I don't know how to connect the dots stronger than this. All of these authoritarians are working together. They are allies. They hate democracy. They hate the West. They hate NATO. I'll get off my soapbox now. So Russia's desperate for a ceasefire, and they're having Viktor Orban accumulate frequent flyer miles. And we talked about F-16s about to arrive. But it's also, their summer offensive has failed. Russia lacks troops and ammunition for a major offensive in Ukraine, according to NATO officials. And it's so bad. This summer has gone so bad for the Russians. Russia loses 90% of their Kharkiv offensive force, according to Ukrainian commanders. So Russian forces have lost more than 90% of the original 10,000 troops initially committed to reinvading the Kharkiv Oblast 2 months ago. And I can pull up this map and show you no change, video after video, but this is just embarrassing for the Russians. They thought they could steal some land. And I'm convinced they did want to get within artillery range of Kharkiv, just so they could better destroy the city. Sure, they wanted a buffer zone to prevent the Foreign Legion from reinvading Belgorod. But I think Putin wanted a chunk of land that he could negotiate with. If he could get 30 kilometers deep into Kharkiv, then he could push his ceasefire peace proposal and say, Ukraine needs to give up the city of Zaporizhia, 700,000 people, and I'll be nice. I'll give up this 30 kilometers of territory in Kharkiv. It's not working, Russia. Here's the next reason why Russia is desperate for a ceasefire. Ukrainian strikes reduce Russian oil refining by nearly 17%. Now, the 17% is quoted from a NATO official. I don't know if this is accurate. I don't even think the Kremlin knows how much of the refining capacity is offline, because everyone in Russia lies about everything. So even if this 17% is true, the upside is Russia still has 83% they can lose. Drones damage energy infrastructure in Russia's Volgograd and Rostov oblasts. This was a successful drone strike carried out by Ukraine. It's never going to stop. Russia can't make it stop. I'll link some clips down below if you want to see some oil depots go boom. This is interesting. Southern Russian heat wave knocks out power for over 500,000 people. Ukraine had nothing to do with this. It's just abnormally hot inside of Russia. And even with their energy grid not under attack, they're still failing their people, and they're experiencing blackouts. Russia faces 6th straight month of price growth, according to Bloomberg. Inflation inside of Russia is pretty horrendous. All Russians are feeling it at the gas pump and the grocery store. The annual Russian inflation rate for June was 8.59%, up from 8.3% the previous month. The figure is significantly higher than that of the United States, which is expected to be around 3.1%. So it's bad in Russia, and it's only going to get worse as long as this war continues and sanctions remain in place. Our revenge will be horrific. Partisans execute new sabotage on Russian railway. This railway is used to transport military equipment and troops to the combat zone. So this rail line was going from Rostov-on-Don to Mariupol, and this is the Atesh partisan group inside of Russia. They've been more active recently, posting on sabotaging railways. Now, Russia does always get this fixed within a couple days, but it still delays deliveries and costs money and manpower. U.S. Department of Justice uncovers Russian AI-powered disinformation network on Twitter. This is Elon Musk's platform, and since Elon Musk bought Twitter, it's gotten worse. The bots are worse than ever, and now the Kremlin is paying for these AI bot farms to spam posts, spam comments, promote Russian propagandists. So the U.S. Department of Justice finally did something and took control of these domains and shut them down, but it's a game of whack-a-mole. If Elon Musk has no interest in stopping pro-Kremlin AI bots on his social media platform, then as soon as the Justice Department shuts down one account or seizes an account, different ones are just going to pop up. This next story is kind of a big deal, but also not a surprise to me. I've been saying this here on the channel for over a year. But Saudi Arabia threatened to sell off Europe's bonds if the EU seized Russian assets. This is according to Bloomberg. Now, the Saudi government today is denying this, but the Saudis are liars. The reason why Russia's money has not been seized in these banks is because dictators and authoritarians around the world love keeping their money in Western banks. Because in Western countries, we have the rule of law, we respect individual property rights. In dictatorships around the world, they don't do that. So dictators don't want to keep their money in the countries of other dictators because they don't feel like their money's secure. However, if Western banks seize Russian assets because Russia is guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity, well, now this makes every dictator in the world nervous because they're all guilty of war crimes and crimes against humanity concerning their own people. So this is just dictators looking out for themselves. I wish we didn't have to have their money in our banks, but this does drive our economies. If dictators around the world pull out of Western banks, this would cause an economic crisis that would negatively impact our economies and ordinary people like you and me. So the G7 came up with this compromise saying they wouldn't touch the principal, but all interest accumulating on the frozen assets would be given to Ukraine. And I guess we're going to learn Saudi Arabia and other dictators' reactions in real time as this is currently happening. So here's a pair of headlines that I view as pretty alarming. Elite North Korean military trainees visit Russia amid deepening ties. North Korea is preparing for their deployment of their troops to the occupied territories. They're saying it's just an engineering unit, but I'm suspicious that these guys will be used in the trenches. They will be fighting on the front lines. And then China and Belarus are wargaming together. The Chinese military is currently conducting drills on the Polish border, NATO's border. So Russia's doing this on purpose to scare us. But it's also important to have this conversation. Like, are people in Europe going to wake up? Everybody in the Nordic countries in Eastern Europe, they're all paying attention. I'm not talking to you, but for the rest of Europe, are you going to start taking this serious? The Russians are bringing in the Chinese and the North Korean military to fight their wars for them now. Are we going to do anything to stop this? So let's get to the good news for Ukraine. The United States announced their latest security package worth $225 million. It's the usual good stuff in there. New Zealand allocates $9.8 million in aid to Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of New Zealand. Canada pledges nearly $370 million in military aid for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the people of Canada. The Netherlands allocates nearly $325 million worth of F-16 munitions for Ukraine. Thank you so much to the Dutch people. Italy to reportedly allocate $1.7 billion in military aid for Kyiv as part of their NATO support. Thank you so much to the people of Italy. Norway to donate 6 F-16 fighter jets to Ukraine, first to arrive in 2024. Thank you so much to the people of Norway. Final clip I want to share with you is from Zarina Zabriskie, U.S. journalist in Ukraine, and she visited the city of Chernihiv. And if you remember last year, there was a concert hall that was blown up by the Russians. They deliberately targeted it. And Zarina visited the city to give you a tour of what Chernihiv looks like today.
This is a very nice wide boulevard, and I'm in Chernihiv. People sitting in the cafes, enjoying drinks, pizzas, very, very modern. Everything is digitalized. There's a QR code, and you can order right there and pay on the account. Everything is online. Everything is working. There are vegan dishes. This is the theater which was targeted and hit in August 2023. About 60 buildings around here were damaged. The roof was destroyed. This beautiful Crimean Tatar restaurant was also damaged. Sort of a cabaret, jazz, musical theater. In the middle of it, there starts narrate. And there was already an explosion here in Chernihiv, so we are advised to take caution. And nobody seems to be in a huge rush to get to a shelter, but nevertheless, the show is over. So I'm walking after a show and listening to the people talking in the streets. During the narrate, everybody is discussing the musical quality, the choreography, and the psychological density of the show.
It's good to see that this theater has been rebuilt, and the city of Chernihiv is doing their best under wartime conditions. That's all for this update video. Glory to Ukraine, glory to the heroes. If you found this video informative, give me a thumbs up. Best way to support the channel. Comments and questions, let me know down below. I love hearing from you guys. Till the next video, keep defending the truth, keep defending democracy.